"You treated this meal right?" my cousin mocked. I walked away without paying their $3,000 dinner bill. Later, my phone blew up with a dozen missed calls. I stood outside the restaurant, watching through the window as my family arrived one by one. The familiar knot in my stomach tightened. I hadn't wanted to come tonight, but my mother's voice on the phone, that guilt-laden, pleading tone she reserved for special occasions, had worn me down. "Just this once, Danny," she'd said. "Everyone will be there." That was precisely what I was afraid of. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The warm air inside carried the scent of expensive perfume and seared steak. A hostess approached with a rehearsed smile, but before she could speak, I spotted them, my family, gathered around a large table near the back. They were already drinking, already laughing, already putting on a show. My cousin Tyler saw me first. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well, look who decided to show up." He raised his glass in my direction as heads turned. "This table is for family, Danny. You can find a seat outside." Laughter rippled through the group. My aunt covered her mouth, pretending to be scandalized but clearly amused. My uncle shook his head with that same dismissive smile I'd grown up with. My mother looked down at her plate. I didn't flinch. I'd expected this. I'd been expecting it for 26 years. Without a word, I pulled a chair from an empty table nearby and positioned it just outside their circle. Close enough to be present, far enough to maintain my dignity. This was familiar territory, the outsider looking in. Growing up, I'd been the family's favorite target, the one who didn't quite fit, the one who was too quiet, too serious, too different. Tyler had always led the charge. My golden cousin with his perfect grades, his athletic trophies, his easy charm that won over teachers and relatives alike. He'd perfected the art of making me feel small while making himself look good. "Danny's just jealous," he'd tell everyone when I wouldn't laugh at his jokes. He was born without a sense of humor, and they'd all nod as if that explained everything. What they never saw was the determination that grew inside me with each dismissal, each mockery, each exclusion. While they were busy laughing, I was busy building, working extra shifts after school, saving every dollar, teaching myself skills no one expected me to master. By 25, I had my own place. By 27, a stable career. By 30, investments that were quietly multiplying. I no longer needed their approval, but old habits die hard and families have long memories, selective as they may be. A waiter appeared at our table, notepad in hand. My family ordered without hesitation the most expensive steaks, premium sides, top-shelf drinks. They ordered as people do when they're not paying the bill. "And for you, sir," the waiter turned to me. "Just water, thank you." Tyler smirked, still pinching pennies. "Danny, come on, live a little." He turned to the waiter. "Bring him the tomahawk ribeye and a scotch, the 25-year. I didn't correct him. I simply watched as they performed their well-rehearsed roles. My mother, still beautiful at 60, laughed too loudly at my uncle's tired jokes. My Aunt Margaret, dropping names of people she barely knew but wanted everyone to think she was close with. My cousins, comparing vacation spots and car models in voices just loud enough for neighboring tables to hear. It was a performance I'd seen many times before. Successful, connected, enviable. What the audience couldn't see were the cracks beneath the surface. The mortgaged homes, the maxed-out credit cards, the loans taken to maintain appearances. I'd learned years ago that in my family, image was everything. Reality was just an inconvenient detail. The food arrived, plates piled high with premium cuts of meat, sides arranged artfully, glasses refilled with expensive liquor. They ate like people with something to prove, making appreciative noises, commenting on the quality, the flavor, how it compared to that restaurant in New York or that steakhouse in Chicago. I ate slowly, saying little, observing much. Tyler dominated the conversation as usual, his voice growing louder with each drink. He'd recently been promoted at the investment firm where he worked, or so he claimed. What he didn't mention was the rumor I'd heard through industry connections about upcoming layoffs at his company. My thoughts drifted to the first time I'd realized how superficial our family relationships were. I was 16 and my father had just left us. Not died, left, walked out on a Tuesday afternoon with a suitcase and never came back. My mother told the family he had passed suddenly. A heart attack, So tragic, so unexpected. It was easier than admitting he'd found another woman, another life, and we weren't part of it. The family rallied around us with casseroles and condolences. They spoke of my father as if he'd been a saint, a loving husband, a dedicated father, all lies. I wanted to scream the truth, to tear down the facade, but my mother's pleading eyes stopped me. "This is how we survive, Danny," she whispered one night after everyone had gone. "We keep up appearances, we don't let them see our weakness." It was the first lesson in the family philosophy, one I never fully embraced. The memory faded as Tyler's voice cut through my thoughts, boasting about his new watch. A limited edition, $30,000. He extended his wrist across the table for everyone to admire. I noticed the slight discoloration around the crown. A replica, good but not good enough. I said nothing. What would be the point? 3 hours and multiple courses later, the dinner was winding down. Desserts had been ordered and consumed. Coffee cups sat empty. The waiting staff had begun to hover, their patient smiles thinning as the restaurant around us gradually emptied. Then came the moment I hadn't anticipated. The bill arrived in a discreet black folder. The waiter, with a slight nod to Tyler, placed it directly in front of me. I stared at the folder, confused. Why would they give me the bill? Tyler leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smirk on his face. "Thanks for offering to treat us tonight, Danny boy. Really generous of you." The table fell silent. All eyes turned to me. I looked around, bewildered. "What are you talking about? I didn't offer to pay for anything," my mother frowned. "But Tyler said, he told us you wanted to treat the family tonight, to show us how well you're doing." I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized what had happened. Tyler had set me up. He'd told the entire family that I was hosting this dinner, that I'd be covering the bill. It was a deliberate humiliation, a trap. Tyler's smirk widened. "Come on, Danny, don't be stingy now, not after you made such a big deal about it." I picked up the folder and opened it slowly. $3,054.87, a ridiculous sum for a single meal. "I never offered to pay for this," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. "Tyler lied to you all." My aunt gasped. My uncle shifted uncomfortably. My mother looked stricken. "But you've been doing so well," Tyler pressed, his voice dripping with false concern. "Always talking about your investments and your savings. Surely you can afford to treat your family just once." I understood then what this was really about. Tyler had heard about my financial stability through the family grapevine. He'd arranged this entire evening to embarrass me, to force me into either paying an exorbitant bill or appearing cheap and selfish in front of everyone. For a moment, I considered just paying for it, avoiding the scene, the drama. It wouldn't break me financially. But as I looked around at these people, these supposed family members who had never supported me, never believed in me, something hardened inside me. I closed the folder and placed it directly in front of Tyler. "You set this up," I said, my voice low but clear. "You pay for it." The table erupted in confused murmurs. Tyler's face flushed red. "Don't be ridiculous," he sputtered. "You're just trying to back out now that the bill's come." I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back. "You all want to know the truth? There is no promotion at your firm, Tyler. In fact, there are layoffs coming. I know because I have friends on the board there." Tyler's face paled. "That watch you're so proud of," I continued. "It's a fake. The car you're leasing, you can barely make the payments. The vacation home you keep bragging about, mortgaged to the hilt." A stunned silence fell over the table. "I never offered to pay for this meal. Tyler lied to humiliate me. But you know what? I'm done. Done with the lies, done with the facades, done with this toxic family." My mother reached for my arm. "Danny, please." I pulled away from her touch. "No, I've spent my entire life trying to earn a place in this family, trying to be good enough, but there's no winning a rigged game." I picked up my jacket, maintaining eye contact with Tyler. "You made your bed, now lie in it." Without another word, I turned and walked out, ignoring the frantic calls behind me. Outside, the night air felt clean and cool. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. My phone buzzed in my pocket, texts from my mother, then Tyler. Desperate messages I chose not to read. That night, as I drove home, I realized something profound had shifted. The family I'd spent my life trying to please, trying to fit into, no longer held power over me. Their approval or disapproval no longer mattered. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. The next morning, I woke to a dozen missed calls and twice as many text messages. My family's panic had apparently escalated throughout the night. I made coffee and sat by my apartment window, watching the city come alive below. Traffic filled the streets, people hurried along sidewalks, all with somewhere to be, someone to meet. Lives intersecting briefly before continuing on their separate paths. My phone buzzed again. My mother, with a sigh, I answered. Her voice was strained, tearful. The restaurant had called the police when Tyler tried to leave without paying. My uncle had eventually put down his corporate card, but it had been declined. In the end, they'd had to call my cousin Jane, a lawyer with a steady income, to come and settle the bill. The shame of it all seemed to be what bothered my mother most. Not the deceit that had brought us all there, not the years of treating me like an outsider, but the public humiliation of being exposed as less than they pretended to be. "How could you do that to us, Danny?" she asked, as if I had orchestrated the entire evening. A familiar hot anger sparked in my chest. "Me? Tyler set me up. He lied to all of you, told you I'd be paying when I never agreed to any such thing, and you believed him without even asking me, just like you always do." "But you embarrassed us in public," she insisted. "You could have just paid the bill and we could have sorted it out later in private." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "That's your solution, that I should have quietly paid for Tyler's manipulation just to keep up appearances." "Family protects family," she said, her voice hardening. "We don't air our dirty laundry in public." "We're not a family," I replied, the words cutting even as they freed me. "We're a collection of people bound by blood and lies, and I'm done with all of it." I could hear her sharp intake of breath. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying goodbye, Mother. I'm done trying to earn a place at a table where I'm not wanted. Done trying to please people who have never respected me. Done pretending." "You don't mean that," she whispered. "We're your family, you need us." "No," I said quietly, suddenly certain. "I don't." I ended the call and blocked her number, then I blocked Tyler's, my aunt's, my uncle's. One by one, I systematically cut the digital ties to the people who had caused me nothing but pain. It felt like cleaning a wound, painful but necessary for healing. The phone calls and text messages continued for days, coming from different numbers as they realized I'd blocked them. I ignored them all. A week later, Tyler showed up at my apartment unannounced. I looked at him through the security peephole, his face distorted by the lens. He looked haggard, desperate. I didn't open the door. "Danny, I know you're in there," he called, knocking again. "Look, I'm sorry about the dinner thing. It was just a joke that got out of hand." I remained silent. "Things are tough right now, okay? I could really use your help, just a small loan until I get back on my feet. Family helps family, right?" The irony was almost painful. After years of mockery and exclusion, now I was suddenly family when he needed something. "Go away, Tyler," I said through the door, "or I'll call security." "Come on, Danny, don't be like that. We're blood." "Blood doesn't make family," I interrupted. "Respect does, trust does, love does. You've shown me none of those things. Now leave before I call the police." There was a long silence, then the sound of footsteps retreating down the hallway. That was the last time I spoke to any of them directly. Over the next few months, I heard snippets through mutual acquaintances. Tyler had indeed lost his job. My uncle's business was failing. My aunt had to sell her jewelry to cover basic expenses. The carefully constructed facade of prosperity was crumbling. I felt no satisfaction in their troubles, no vindication. Only a quiet sadness for the genuine family we could have been had there been honesty instead of pretense, support instead of competition. My mother made one final attempt to reach me, sending a handwritten letter that arrived 3 months after the restaurant incident. Her elegant script filled 3 pages with reminiscences of my childhood, expressions of regret, pleas for reconciliation. It was beautifully written, emotionally compelling, and utterly manipulative. She didn't acknowledge her part in my exclusion from the family. Didn't mention Tyler's deliberate setup at the restaurant. Didn't take responsibility for decades of choosing appearances over authenticity. Instead, she wrote of family bonds that couldn't be broken, of blood being thicker than water, of the obligation children had to their parents. I read the letter twice, then consigned it to the shredder. Some bridges once burned should remain ashes. 6 months after cutting ties with my family, I accepted a job offer in another city. A fresh start in a place with no memories, no history, no shadows of the past. As I packed my apartment, sorting through years of accumulated possessions, I came across an old photo album. Pictures of family gatherings, holidays, celebrations. Smiling faces hiding complicated truths. I almost threw it away unopened, but something made me pause, made me flip through the pages one last time. There we all were, the perfect family, the beautiful lie. I closed the album and placed it in a box marked Donate. Someone else could use the empty frame. My new city was everything I needed, vibrant, anonymous, full of possibilities. I bought a small but elegant apartment in a downtown high-rise, made new friends who knew nothing of my past, built a life based on my own terms, my own values. For the first time, I felt completely authentic. No need to defend myself, explain myself, prove myself. No need to brace for the next cutting remark or backhanded compliment. Just freedom, just peace. A year passed, then two. I settled into my new life, my new reality. The sharp edges of old wounds gradually smoothed. The anger that had once burned so hot cooled into something more manageable, a quiet wariness, a determination to protect my boundaries. At a dinner party with new friends, someone asked about my family. Without thinking, I replied, "I don't have one." The words surprised me with their simplicity, their truth. "Everyone has a family," my friend protested, confused. I smiled, swirling the wine in my glass. "I have people I'm related to by blood. That's not the same thing as having a family." Later that night, walking home under a canopy of stars, I reflected on that moment. On the person I'd become since walking out of that restaurant 2 years ago. I was happier, healthier, more at peace. The constant need for validation, the endless striving to prove myself worthy of inclusion in a group that never truly wanted me, all of that was gone now. In its place was something steadier, a quiet confidence built not on others' approval but on self-respect, on knowing who I was and what I stood for. I'd found my own family, not in blood relatives but in chosen connections. Friends who valued honesty over appearances, colleagues who respected hard work and integrity, neighbors who showed more genuine care than my blood relatives ever had. These were my people now. This was my tribe. As I reached my building, I paused to look up at the night sky. The stars were partially obscured by city lights, but a few bright ones managed to shine through. I thought about how far I'd come, both literally and figuratively, from that suffocating family dynamic. 2 years of silence had brought me more peace than decades of trying to belong ever did. I no longer jumped when my phone rang, no longer felt that familiar knot of anxiety before family gatherings, no longer measured my words carefully to avoid becoming the target of Tyler's mockery. I was free. Sometimes freedom comes not from what you gain, but from what you release. I had released the need for their approval, the hope for their understanding, the desire for their love. And in doing so, I'd found room for genuine connections, for relationships built on mutual respect rather than obligation. I'd received occasional updates about my family through mutual acquaintances. Tyler had indeed lost his job. My uncle's business was struggling. My aunt had to downsize. The carefully constructed facade of prosperity was crumbling without my silent support to prop it up. I felt no satisfaction in their troubles, no vindication, only a quiet sadness for the genuine family we could have been had there been honesty instead of pretense, support instead of competition. But that was their journey now, not mine. I had built something different for myself, something real. I entered my apartment and set my keys on the counter. My home was a reflection of who I truly was, neither ostentatious nor severe, but comfortable, authentic, lived in. Books lined the shelves, photographs of new friends and new memories decorated the walls. No family portraits, no forced smiles hiding complicated truths. Just honesty, just peace. That night I stood on my balcony, watching as the sun set over my adopted city. The sky blazed with colors, oranges and pinks and purples painting the horizon. I thought about family, about blood ties and chosen connections, about the courage it takes to walk away and the strength it requires to build something new. And I felt a sense of closure wash over me, not because my family had changed or because they'd finally recognized my worth, but because their opinion no longer defined me. I had found my own definition of family, built on respect, on honesty, on genuine care. The sun dipped below the horizon, darkness settling over the city like a gentle blanket. Lights flickered on in windows across the skyline, each one representing a life, a story, a family of some kind. I went inside and called my closest friend, invited her over for dinner the next evening, asked if she could bring that homemade bread I loved so much, listened to her laugh as she agreed. This was my family now, chosen, authentic, real. And as I ended the call, I felt gratitude sweep through me, not for what I'd lost, but for what I'd found. Not for where I'd been, but for where I was going. A life without toxic ties, a future without false performances, a family built on love rather than obligation. It wasn't the ending I'd once hoped for. It was better. It was mine.